What is going on, everybody? We are back with March Madness. It is that time of the year, maybe the best playoff system in all of sports. Finally here, Selection Sunday. We're going to run through our bracket, give you some of my picks, my favorite upsets, my favorite Final Four contenders, and all in all, go through the bracket, give our predictions for March Madness in 2023. Let's start going. Let's start in the East region with Purdue as the number one seed, taking on Texas Southern versus FDU. Purdue maybe has the best player in the country in Zach Edey, 7'4", big center for the Purdue Boilermakers. I'm not betting against him in round number one. One seeds have only lost one game in the first round, so let's not mess around. Purdue going on. 8-9 matchup in the East, Memphis versus Florida Atlantic. Really good matchup here. Florida, I think FAU's only lost 3 games the entire season. Memphis coming off that championship game win versus Houston. Yes, they were down Marcus Sasser, so we have to keep that in mind. But Memphis completely dominated Houston, pretty much start to finish in that game. Awesome in transition for Memphis. Memphis can be a little bit undisciplined on defense when they're not getting out in fast break and transition. But Florida Atlantic hasn't played a game against a team in the tournament. Beat Florida by 2 points, their lone impressive win on the season, and also lost to Ole Miss, who's not even in the tournament. So their 2 biggest games against teams that didn't even qualify for the bracket challenge. So I'm going to go ahead and Memphis, coming off that championship win against Houston, riding that momentum into the second round. Here at the 5-12 game, Duke, Oral Roberts. Not many people remember Oral Roberts actually went to the Sweet 16 a couple years back, upsetting Ohio State and making it to the second weekend. I'm not saying they're going to duplicate that success that they had 2 years ago, but definitely a successful, productive unit for Oral Roberts. Could give Duke some trouble here. I think a lot of people are just putting Duke with their most recent success advancing in this game, but I think we need to look at Oral Roberts here as a potential upset. I'm going to go with Duke just because Kyle Filipowski, that 7-footer post presence that can do it from all 3 levels on the floor, going along with that smothering defense that Duke brings with 2 7-footers and a point guard in Tyrese Proctor, who's controlling the game, and Duke's at their best when he has the ball in his hand, facilitating this offense and creating shots alongside Filipowski. With a solid point, couple strong wings on the outside, and Filipowski in the middle, I'm not picking against the ACC champ Duke Blue Devils, who've won, I think, 9 games in a row. Give me Duke moving on to the second round. Tennessee and Louisiana Lafayette. This could be a very surprising game right here. I like Louisiana Lafayette to win this game, mainly due to Tennessee losing Zakai Ziegler, one of their most dominant ball handlers for this team. Yes, they are very great defensively, one of the best defensive teams in the country, which is going to make people gravitate towards them in their brackets. But missing Ziegler's going to hurt Tennessee, maybe not in the first round, but especially later in the tournament. I don't see them making a big run without him, even with their dominant front court. 2 very good defensive big men. Without Ziegler, I can't see them advancing past the second round. If they are able to get against ULL, I do think Louisiana's going to come out here, make it a close game nonetheless. Maybe not get the outright win, but definitely going to be a good game here. I'm going to take Louisiana to get the upset in round 1 and move on to play the Duke Blue Devils. As we keep it moving, Kentucky, a 6th seed in the tournament. Last year, coming off that heartbreaking loss to St. Peter's, who had a magical Cinderella run. Didn't quite make it to the Final Four, but still, St. Peter's awesome showing last year. This year, Kentucky, fresh off getting bounced in the SEC tournament. A lot of people had them winning the SEC tournament as, I believe, the 3rd best odds in that conference. Still, Oscar Tshiebwe against Providence. I think he's still going to be a problem for them. I'm taking the best player in this matchup, Oscar Tshiebwe. Huge rebounding 6'9" forward for Kentucky. Kansas State, one of the surprise teams this season. In the preseason polls, not predicted to have much success this year, but still, Kansas State finds their way as a 3 seed. Coming out of the Big 12. I like them to win this matchup. A little worried about their turnover history. They do like to turn the ball over a little bit too much for my taste, so that's definitely something I want to keep in mind here, but I'm still going to go with Kansas State in the first round to move on to play Kentucky. Michigan State, USC, 2 very dominant programs here meeting in the first round. What it's going to come down to me is coaching. I like Tom Izzo. I want to bet on Tom Izzo over USC. If there's a toss-up game, I always lean in coaching in college basketball. I think it plays a major factor as compared to NBA, where coaching isn't as important. So I'm going with Tom Izzo to move on to the second round to play Marquette, the number 2 seed in the East. I think they should advance with flying colors. Vermont is a very good basketball team, but Marquette, I think, is just too good coming out of the East. All right, let's head over to the South region with the overall number 1 seed, Alabama. What do we have here?
All right, so off the top, we got Alabama moving on. Virginia's the only 1 seed to lose. Won't happen again. In this Maryland-West Virginia matchup, I like both the teams. Maryland struggles on the road, and that could be a problem here, but I like that Maryland goes four guys that are in double figures. So I'm going to pick them to move on over West Virginia. San Diego State and Charleston. Charleston's been a nice story as a mid-major.
Wagon.
Got got into the top 25 poll, but I really like San Diego State's depth. They got eight guys that play about 20 minutes, and I think that's a good thing for the tournament. So we're going with San Diego State. Virginia and Furman. Virginia is kind of they're usually always all defense, but this year their defense is still good, but it's only I think ranked 25th. I'm still going to give them the edge over Furman, but I could see that being a tight game. Then we got Creighton and NC State.
The
NC
pack.
State got left out of the gym by Clemson, sadly, in the ACC tournament. And I think that's kind of going to carry over here. I like Creighton. They've had a good team this year. Baylor and UC Santa Barbara. Baylor's been struggling down the stretch, lost a couple times to Iowa State, so I think a lot of people might fade them. But I think they got three good guards, and they're going to move on over UC Santa Barbara. Missouri and Utah State. This could be a very high-scoring matchup. Not too much defense, a lot of offense, but I really like the Mountain West this year. They've struggled in the tournaments past, but I think they'll get it done here, and Utah State's going to advance over Missouri. Arizona and Princeton. We're just going to go with Arizona.
Let's head over to the Midwest, where Houston is the number 1 seed.
Obviously, Houston injuries that was not great. And, essentially they a really costly loss in the AAC championship game, but they're wagon. I'd really like them to move on. Iowa Auburn is essentially just which team starts off really hot. You could watch the first 5 minutes, and if Iowa's on and shooting, making everything, they're going to run Auburn at the building. If they're missing everything, they might lose by 20. So I actually like Auburn here in the upset. They foul a lot, but Iowa's very hot and cold when it comes to shooting. It's just a fact. For Miami and Drake, Miami is really good. They look pretty good against Duke, even in that loss, and I think they're a little underseeded, but they're going to get the job done against Drake. Indiana and Kent State is Indiana of all the Big Ten teams in here probably has the best chance to make the deepest run. They're a pretty complete team, and even they swept Purdue, which just feels kind of random, but they did sweep Purdue pretty handily. So they're going to get the job done against Kent State. The Iowa State versus Mississippi State or Pitt, it's going to be a muck-it-up game. It's going to be the first team to get to 60 points. Iowa State also, as mentioned earlier, beat Baylor twice, and that's that for as much as they were kind of limping into the tournament, they looked pretty good right at the end, so take them over the 11th seed. Xavier, Kennesaw State. This is a pretty chalky, bracket so far, but I like Xavier. They blew the doors off Creighton with their talent. A&M, Penn State. A&M for their inconsistency in the shooting from the field. It's pretty good at getting to the line and had the best guards in the SEC, so I'm going to take them to knock out Penn State, and to, as we discussed earlier, completely on purpose match themselves up with Texas because they are going to beat Colgate, and that'll be just create the narratives right there for A&M and Texas to rematch again.
Let's head down to the last region of the round of 64, the West region, starting with the number 1 Kansas Jayhawks. What do we have here?
Too easy. It's going to be Kansas. I mean, they've got the most quad 1 wins, so don't doubt them here. And then for Arkansas and Illinois, this is probably going to be the toughest game to pick of the first round. Two teams who do a lot of great things, but then also have a bunch of random bad losses. In this one, I think I'm just going to take Illinois because I feel like they're playing a little bit better than Arkansas is right now.
Okay, the St. Mary's VCU matchup. St. Mary's, they've had a good season, but they haven't played in 10 days, I believe. Their conference tournament's really early. And I like how VCU's been playing recently, so we'll go with the classic 12-5 upset here. And then UConn and Iona. I love this matchup. You got Rick Pitino looking to join the Big East next year, potentially at St. John's. This could be a try, but I like UConn a lot this year. Sonogo is great big, and I don't think Iona can match up with him.
No. Going forward, TCU against two teams that absolutely should not be in the tournament, both just I don't have no idea how Nevada got in the tournament. They lost pretty early in the Mountain West tournament. So just take TCU, who has proven in Big 12 play they can go toe to toe with the best teams in that league. So they have some value there. Gonzaga is a 15.5 point favorite, I think, which is something you really only see for 1 seeds or 2 seeds against the weakest 15. So they're getting a lot of value here. So obviously they should blow the doors off Grand Canyon.
Northwestern and Boise State. This could be a tough game. Good season for Northwestern, but like I said earlier, I think the Mountain West gets its revenge, and we're gonna go with Boise State, a
Good
small
take.
upset.
Great take.
And then UCLA. I mean, that's 2-15 matchup.
There's no St. Peter's in this tournament, I promise.
Back in the East region in the round of 32, Purdue versus Memphis. I'm putting Purdue on upset alert against either Memphis or FAU. I think both could pose some problems for Purdue. I think Memphis definitely a much better matchup. They played against much bigger opponents, more experience with guys like Zach Edey. Definitely, obviously, no one to that caliber, but still, I think they have more experience against bigger, stronger athletes. I think if they're able to speed Purdue up and get them out of the half court in transition, I like Memphis to win this game over Purdue. I don't trust the guard play for the Purdue Boilermakers. We've seen time and time again in March teams that rely on their front court, big men, star big men, like Zach Edey. We saw it a couple years ago with DeAndre Ayton in Arizona. These teams that don't have efficient and productive backcourt guards that can dribble, control the game, they tend to struggle in March when the game slows down, pull the upset over the number 1 seed Purdue Boilermakers in the East region. Second round matchup, Duke versus Louisiana Lafayette, who I had over Tennessee, but I can't ignore the fact of how hot this team is. First year coach winning an ACC championship. Yes, it's a low seed for Duke. They're used to being a top 4 seed in the tournament, so a 5 seed's a little bit rare for them, but I still think this team is very talented, very good defensively. I think that defense is going to be just enough to get to the second weekend into the Sweet 16, led by their star freshman, Kyle Filipowski. To the bottom portion of the East region, I like Oscar Tshiebwe over Kansas State. They've had a magical run this year. Something about Kentucky losing to St. Peter's last year. I think they're going to have extra motivation in this tournament. I like Kentucky moving on to the Sweet 16 over Kansas State. Michigan State versus Marquette. This could be a very high-scoring game. Two pretty efficient and productive offenses in this game. The difference maker, in my opinion, is going to be Tyler Kolek, the guard for the Marquette Golden Eagles. I think such a great assist man while also developing his offensive game as he's grown. I think Kolek, his distribution ability, the assist numbers around 8 to 9 assists a game, double-digit scoring. I think that's going to be enough to overcome Michigan State's offensive attack led by head coach Tom Izzo. So I'm taking the Golden Eagles to move on into the second weekend.
What do we have in the Alabama-Maryland matchup?
All right, here we go. I think this is going to be the first major upset of the tournament here. I know it's in Birmingham, so we got Alabama. It's basically a road game for Maryland. Like I mentioned earlier, I think Maryland's won 2. I don't care.
They won 2 games on the road.
They got 4 guys that can score 10 points. I like Jameer Young and Dante Scott. And Alabama, they live and die by the 3. I think they missed a few here, and we got Maryland in the massive upset.
Here we go. We had Alabama losing in the second round last year. Made us look very foolish here. We're going right back to it.
San Diego State and Virginia. I mean, this game might get to the 50s. I really don't know. But like I mentioned earlier, San Diego State's depth, I think that's going to be very beneficial in this game. And we're going to have the Aztecs in a small upset, 5-4. Creighton and Baylor. Baylor, they were limping. I think after the win over UC Santa Barbara, they can get it back on track a little bit and take care of Creighton, even though Creighton will probably be a trendy team to pick to go far in this tournament. Usually those don't work out, whoever the trendy pick is. So we're going to go with Baylor. Arizona and Utah State. This could be a good little matchup here. Once again, a lot of offense, but I like Arizona a lot this year. I like Tabellis. I don't know if Utah State can match up with him.
All right, so our 2 number 1 seeds are now out of the tournament, with Purdue losing to Memphis and Maryland taking down Alabama. Will the number 1 team survive in the Midwest with Houston?
I think Auburn is kind of like Iowa. They're pretty streaky, and I think that streak or that consistency really comes and bites them in the ass here. Houston's just too good, even with the injuries. It should be a comfortable win over Auburn here. The next round, Miami and Indiana. This is going to be a really good game. Both teams score a lot of points, and both teams have about the same resume where they beat a bunch of really good teams, including a number one seed, but they also have some bad losses on their resume. I think this is going to be the must-watch game of the second round, and for that, I'm still going with Miami, even though they have trouble with big men in the paint. I still think they're just a bit of a better team than Indiana. Iowa State and Xavier, it's two teams that like to play fast. Xavier is one of the best offenses in the country, and I don't know how trendy they are yet on going deep, but this is my kind of trendy pick, value pick to go pretty deep. And I think they'll comfortably beat Iowa State. For all those Baylor wins, they also didn't play very well in February. And then finally, A&M and Texas. It's exactly what the TV people want. They want narratives. They want rivalries. I don't totally know where this game is. It'd be even funnier if it was in Texas. Just it felt like it was written in the stars. And I think A&M, for as much as I've kind of picked on that they don't shoot super consistently, I think they're playing a little bit better right now, and I honestly think they could be a dark horse to come out of the region. I think they're going to handle Texas. It'll be really close. Another great second round game, but give it to the Aggies.
Okay, our first 2 seed hitting the bricks in the Midwest. Let's go back down to the West region. Kansas still the number 1 seed available here. Ryan, what do we have?
Kansas again. Rock chalk. It's just Illinois, for all their good stuff, they just aren't as consistent as Kansas. Don't enough NBA talent. The other half of this is another pretty good game. A hot team versus a team that at its peak is the best team in the entire country, and they proved in November with their win over Alabama. I think UConn is going to take it here over VCU. I think if they put it all together again, they are another team that could run real deep.
TCU and Gonzaga. I like Gonzaga. They're peaking at the right time. However, I really think this is where you value with TCU. They're a very physical team. Gonzaga doesn't really like to play physical. Like what I've seen out of Big 12 teams overall this year, toughest conference. We're going to go with an upset TCU over Gonzaga. Boise State, UCLA. I said I like the Mountain West, but UCLA, they got Mick Cronin. They got some experienced players, Jaime Jaquez and Tiger Campbell. Even with the loss of Jalen Carter, I think they'll pull through here, and we'll go with UCLA over Boise State.
All right, back to the East region. I have Memphis beating Purdue and meeting up with Duke in the Elite Eight. This is a good game. I think, like I talked about earlier, Memphis a little bit undisciplined defensively, a little sporadic. Yes, they do force a lot of turnovers and get out and run, but I think this Duke team is just too talented and too focused and too hot right now coming off that ACC championship. 2 star 7-footers, Derek Lively and Filipowski, with a 6'10 center coming off the bench who provides them some pretty good minutes. Offensive rebounding to go along with Roach and Proctor in the backcourt. I think this team is very strong. I think it's too much for Penny Hardaway and the Memphis Tigers. Give me Duke moving on to the Elite Eight. Kentucky and Marquette. Sheway, so dominant in the paint, such a big presence. They need to find a way to get him the ball in the paint. They have struggled at times finding him, scheming him open in the half court, which could pose a problem for Kentucky. But if they're able to get him looks and keep him out of foul trouble, he's going to clean the glass like no one's business, providing 10 to 15 rebounds game in and game out. I like Kentucky, but Marquette's been good so year. I think no one's talking about the team from Milwaukee, so I'm going to go with the Golden Eagles over the Kentucky Wildcats.
Right here, what are we having in the South region with
Maryland and San Diego State? I think the Mountain West, they just keep pulling through. They were 0-6. They get a team in the Elite Eight this year, San Diego State. Baylor and Arizona, this is another great matchup. Baylor's got the 3 good guards and Jonathan Chachua, but I really like Arizona this year. They've struggled in the tournaments recently. They just haven't been able to put it together last year, getting upset by Houston. But I think this could be their year to make a run to the Final Four. So we'll go with Arizona.
It is. Good take. Houston, Miami. This is where Miami's defensive issues will come to a very ugly head with Houston, who can score with the best and defend with the best. Their only real wart is they foul a lot, but Miami just won't have the horses to keep up with another team that drew, even in a weaker conference, is one of the best teams in the country. As Xavier A&M, this one will be a lot of points, not a lot of defense, and I think Xavier if you want to pick a team that just absolutely just going to score 1 million points in this tournament, it's going to be Xavier, and I think they'll just get into a track meet and blow them out.
All right, let's go down to our last remaining teams in the Sweet 16. Kansas, the top seed here. What are we looking at, Ryan?
I actually really love UConn, and as much as Kansas has been a dominant tour de force, they also have some random losses mixed in there to good teams, but teams that they are better than, especially in Texas, and then their loss to Kansas State earlier in the year. UConn had hit a bit of a snag, but they absolutely came alive in the Big East tournament. So I think they're actually going to take the upset here. This is not going to be a chalky tournament like last year.
Okay, our third number 1 seed down. Wyatt, to finish out this West region, TCU, are we moving on?
Okay, I like TCU. They made a good run making to the Sweet 16, but I think
Don't do it.
UCLA is gonna pull through here. They got
Thank-
the tournament experience.
Thank
Mick
God.
Cronin, tournament coach.
All right, in the East region, our final two teams, Duke and Marquette. I've seen a lot of people picking these two teams. Probably the two hottest teams in the country. That's probably why they've entered here so frequently. Both teams coming off a conference championship. When it comes down to this game, I'm going to give the edge to Marquette just solely because their path to this game is much, much easier than Duke's. For that reason alone, I'm going to fade the Dukies here and go with Marquette to make it to the Final Four and be one step closer to cutting down the nets in Houston.
Who is going on to the Final Four right here with Arizona and San Diego State?
Yeah, I believe this is the South region. I'm sure there'll be a lot of fans for these two West Coast teams in the Elite Eight here. But San Diego State, they made a good run making it to the Elite Eight. But we're gonna have to go with Arizona to pull through.
On my half, this is another game like Xavier's previous game. It could be a track meet, just two really elite teams. And I still, even with, again, as I said earlier, even with the injuries Houston just experienced, I think they're too talented of a team not to be. This is the year they make the Final Four. They got pretty close last year. I think this year they find a breakthrough of Calvin Sampson.
Okay, so Houston and Arizona moving on to the Final Four in Houston, Texas. Who will be the last team to punch their ticket in Houston between these two guys right here?
UConn is the best team in the country when they're absolutely firing on all cylinders. UCLA, for as much as I love him, does have a couple of bad injuries, and we have no idea how far they're gonna be, and if they'll, not have another injury at this time. So I'm gonna take UConn.
Yeah, I agree with the UConn pick here. Jalen Carter, this is where the injury is gonna come to bite UCLA. I really like UConn. I think they're top 20 in both offense and defensive efficiency.
Yes, they are.
And so when they're playing well, tough team to beat.
Okay, so our Final Four teams left in March Madness is going to be Arizona, Marquette, Houston, and UConn. What are your guys' personal Final Fours, and how does it match up against what we came up with right here?
I've been burned by them multiple times, but I can't turn away. I love Arizona. I think they're coming out of the South. I have Houston, UConn one side, but on the other side, I actually have Kentucky coming out of the East. This Cal's teams that get to the Final Four are usually a little underrated.
Yeah, honestly, the same thing for me. I have Arizona, Houston, and UConn, but I do differ in that bottom left region, which I kind of think is the weakest region.
Yes.
I considered Purdue to be the weakest 1 seed, but then they matched them up with Marquette, who they also consider to be the weakest 2 seed. Tennessee's got the 4 seed, and they got an injury to their starting point guard. So I'm with Ryan here. I think the winner of this region is going to be from the Kansas State-Kentucky matchup. And I'm actually going with Kansas State there, so I have Kansas State in my Final Four.
What?
I really like Marquise Noel.
Okay, as we wrap up, fight the clock here. Why, give me the winner between a potential Arizona Marquette in the Final Four.
Yeah, I'm going to keep rolling with Arizona. I think if they get it this far, they've figured out all their March demons at that point. So we're going to roll with Arizona over Marquette.
Okay, and Ryan, Houston versus UConn. Who comes out of this one?
Give me UConn. It'll be the injuries.
Hey, UConn upsetting Houston in Houston. Wyatt, wrap this up for me. A potential Arizona UConn championship game. Who will be the winner right here?
So we talked about this pretty much throughout the whole thing. When UConn is playing well, they're the best team in the country, making their shots. So I'm going to go with UConn over Arizona.
Okay, in your personal brackets, who is the national champion for each of you guys, real quick, before we go?
UConn. I love them. They're my team. I'm gonna bet a lot on this March, and it might bite me in the ass.
I'm actually going to go with Houston for me. I know they got the injury to Marcus Sasser. I just think
That's
Jim Nance calling his last tournament
in his
in
hometown,
his hometown,
alma
Houston,
mater.
playing in Houston. I just think it's made storybook ending.
It's a destiny ending. I love that. That's
I-
great for TV.
I totally agree. If Houston's able to end up in the Final Four in Houston, I don't see a picture in where they lose in their home city. I think it would be Houston in this situation. Thank you guys for watching our prediction of the 2023 March Madness Bracket Challenge. See you guys next time.